What's happening out there, Colored Commentary family? You are here at Colored Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. I am your host, Markus Lloyd, and with me, as always, in the studio, Mr. Antwuan Malone. What's up, Antwuan?
Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Casa
de Colored
Commentary. You guys didn't see that, but the eye buck right there.
I don't know if we can call it. I don't know. Can you call it Casa de Colored Commentary? We'll
Colored Commentary. I fixed it already.
Casa de. It's okay. CC,
yeah.
CACC.
Anyway,
Casa de, I don't know. I am learning Spanish, as you know. So
does that count? What we did?
I don't think we should make it count.
I don't think it matters. Yeah.
Who's ever lilistening, we are not counting that.
Was it. They're like
as Spanish. That's
already.
Fantastic. So, you know what I want to do right now. I want to do the segment. Say what?
I was gonna say I'm a little afraid.
You should be.
Okay.
For the listeners, this is a section where we talk about different things that maybe we have heard folks say, either people of color to other people of color to white people to people of color, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That has these racial undertones, and try to understand how we would respond and if they are in fact racist or not. Okay.
Did they?
Do you have one for
I
our segment today?
I do have one. There was
Okay.
I was in a I really like this lady. We did a lot of work together. I don't know why I'm caveating.
You are caveat. Just say what you don't even have to tell us.
Yeah. Well, it
the
was a conversation, and it was a writing group, and we were out in a kind of writing retreat in the middle of
giving
nowhere.
a lot of information that anybody
It's
in that
in
writing
the middle
group
of
would know.
nowhere. They'll know exactly who I'm talking about. That's okay. We had time.
Oh, okay.
It was
All
several
right.
years
I
ago.
just want the names are trying to be protected.
They are not paying attention to this. To this podcast.
That's just not their.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, so we were sharing like things we said when we childhood stories. We had gotten to a break, and this lady was basically describing some situation with her son, and her son wasn't doing the right thing, and it was a flippant thing she said. And she was like, "Yeah, so we had to go out there, and I told him this. You need to act white."
She said, "Act right."
Act white.
Like
W. White. She was. She said Steve Harvey White. Steve Harvey was in there with the
what?
There's no such as there's no her. It's
What?
What?
Show me what?
Okay, sorry. Steve Harvey has to what? So it was act white. It was Steve Harvey.
Okay.
No, but she said, and so I asked, I did that. I was like, say what?
It's like what?
She said act white, and it kept going. Like
she just kept like
it wasn't the point of the story.
Yeah.
It was like she just was saying what she was saying. It wasn't the point of the story. So she kept it moving, and I was like, wow, that's kind of wild. It was only like 6 of us, and I went on to the rest of the day, and it just again made.
Were you the only person of color?
I was the only person of color.
Okay.
Made a mental note. We had been doing relationship for a long time, so I had a lot of trust with this person. It was this colloquialism though, maybe that they grew up with. She came up, to her credit, she came to me at the end of the night. I think someone else in the room caught it and said, "Hey, you might want to."
Well, that's nice.
So she was like, "Oh, apologetic. It's just a phrase that we say." Yeah, but the point was when the son or the child was acting bad or doing something that they shouldn't do, they were being told to act like they're white.
Because
I think that was the actual phrase. The phrase wasn't act white. It was act like you're white. Or something to that effect.
That almost is worse.
I know. Yes.
The more words, the worse.
It was, and so it was like, what? And so inherent in that is white is good, black is bad. It's an interesting thing,
and not uncommon.
I mean, she's probably, this was probably 15 years ago or so, and longer than that, maybe 15 to 20 years ago, that because I was doing writing at the time, and that was before I got into ministry. So at least 10.
But it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. So, and the reason I'm saying that is at that time I was probably, the age that I was, she was at that time probably 65
the age you
or
are
70.
Now? Oh, she ain't with us anymore.
No, she's still here.
She's still around?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah, if she's 60 or 70, 20 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. So her time frame
Yeah.
is, you get a sense for when that statement was probably said.
Mm.
It was probably a normal thing. And it sounded so colloquial. It sounded so secondhand that, it sounded like it's been in the conversation. Like, you get the sense that it's just a thing that was said as part of a culture.
Yeah. Didn't even have a full understanding of where it came from or why.
It was just act like you're white or something like that.
Well, I think to sum all that up, I mean, when you hear something like that, and particularly taking into consideration the age of the person, it behooves us to recognize that those time frames just created this sort of systemic, if I can call it mental racism, that just became kind of the water that people swam in.
Yeah.
And what I would imagine she's probably having to do now, hopefully, is to kind of release herself from that and kind of deconstruct, if you will, some of those mindsets. And it's up to, in many ways, I'd imagine for me, I feel it's up to me to kind of be like, I'm going to give you an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know
what? Yeah. You know what? Especially with my older saints, what we often find with my older saints is, oh man, you're taking it too. It's just a phrase. We didn't really mean nothing by it. It's just something we said. Like, so it isn't oh man, we need to look at this different. It's a lot of, we didn't mean any harm by it, and that's not what I meant when I said it. And so it's not a lot of introspection. It really is hey, maybe you should just let that go. It's not that serious. That's the typical response.
Yeah.
From my older saints.
Well,
and I mean, yeah.
Well, lucky us, we get to experience that and then bring it to our listeners for another segment.
Saith what?
Saith what? Man, good to be here. Again, still new.
Yeah, new things.
As we roll into the studio here, still getting kind of used to. We've been doing this.
Like how I'm gonna sit.
Where are you gonna put your feet
and do a little
right?
Something.
Yeah, all those things.
This right here.
Is that the one you feeling comfortable with that?
I mean,
we'll take a poll. You know what I mean? We'll see. Like maybe people can tell us what they want to see us. No, I
don't think we should.
No, I don't think that's the one either.
Once again, that's the second one. You only got one more.
We got to get a guest in here or something quick because it's just getting us going. You doing all right today? I mean,
I'm good.
We're getting into this thing.
I'm good.
Yeah, it's good. I'm really excited. Glad to be in this series that we're in right now. It's obviously a crazy time in the midst of this election season, as many of you are probably experiencing, both personally, and then we see even sort of culturally as well. And just really, as we said last time, like we just really feel the need to try to create a sense of what it looks like for the Christian, if you will, to be active or non-active, or what does the Christian do in this space?
Yeah.
Right? Like what is the public expression of Christianity? What does that look like in the public sphere, in the public square?
Yeah.
And so, of course, last time we talked about the idea of whether, should Christians be involved at all? You know what I mean? And kind of, giving our own ideas with that. But as we continue this series, we'll be going through lots of different things, lots of different ideas and engagements around this. We hope it's going to be really helpful for our audience going forward. So
I'm looking to learn a lot.
Yeah, as am I. So I say we kind of just jump in, right? Because I know this particular episode is going to be kind of chocked full of a lot of good conversation, particularly with our guests that we got here this time, right? And so we're excited to bring in for this conversation a friend of the show, has been on the show before. This is a gentleman that works over at Dallas Theological Seminary, is a New York Times bestselling writer. He's the executive director of cultural engagement at the Hendricks Center at DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary. And we're going to come in and talk a little bit about these cultural identities with the man himself, Dr. Daryl Bock. How you doing, Dr. Bock?
I'm doing great, Marcus. How are you doing?
Good, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. And Antwuan's a fellow fellow colleague in crime
That's right.
at the church. So
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We
What
attend
kind
the
of
same,
church are y'all going to
spot.
that crime is the determination of the... Oh, my
That's what
goodness.
that's what
Well,
that's what the
kind of
enemy
what the
calls
gospel
it.
is about, right?
Oh, is
Sin?
it?
Sin.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. I guess that's kind of a circuitous way to get there, but I'm in on it. That'll
That's
work.
right. Yeah, we're into forgiveness too. Though.
Oh,
So we're
okay.
not
I just
right.
look. I needed to
We're
see
not in
all
jail.
sides of this
It's a
thing.
little, it's levels to this.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Levels.
Well, Derek, we're glad you're here in studio with us. It's the first time you've been to our studio. This is like the second time we've been in the studio,
That's
so
right.
this is
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
for
We're all
us
new.
to bring it in here. So welcome back to Colored Commentary.
Yeah.
So we're talking about these ideas of identities, these competing identities. I think particularly in the midst of an election season, right? Like you're constantly being pulled in different directions based on whether, identities you've created yourself or identities people have put upon you, right? And for the Christian, who obviously should have this sort of primary identity as the Christian, we still find that going and happening, particularly in the political space. I know when we've sat down and talked about this a little bit, you've kind of highlighted a kind of, what do you call it, a taxonomy, in which the Christian the span of who Christians are in the midst of this kind of season that I think might be a good way to kind of start our conversation in thinking about these identities. So do you want to unpack that a little bit for us and then we can work off of that?
Okay, sounds great. It's at spectrum, first of all.
Okay,
so it's not
perfect.
boxes.
Okay.
That's important to know
Yeah.
because you can be, I'm going to talk about 6 different groups. So you can be a 1.5 or a 3.2.
Oh, okay. Working
So
from one. All right.
working as you move.
Because I don't like to be put
down
in a
the
box, so
scale.
this is good. I'm claustrophobic.
No, I'm
anyway,
letting you walk. I'm letting you walk.
Yeah, I can walk around.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Good.
Smooth gradient.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now, I don't
Classification.
know whether it's tilted one way or
Well,
the other. That's a whole other
fair
story.
enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
So let me start. So group 1 are what I call the Christian nationalists and or people who think that the race discussion, this is a race taxonomy.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That the race discussion has gone too far, that we've basically solved the major problems that exist, and there's way too much discussion of race these days. In some cases, some may think there's even examples of reverse discrimination that we have to cope with, et cetera. So that's the first group. And they are the most hesitant and resistant in having discussions about race because they think it's just, why are we talking about this again? The second group is what I call the unengaged. It's actually a very big group. It's a group that is aware of the race discussion, but their preference is to stay out of it. They don't have hard-edged views. They just, in some cases, are tired of the topic. The reason they're unengaged is for a wide variety of reasons. There's no single reason why they're unengaged, but they just think there's too much talk about it. I don't want to be involved in it. I just want to live my life and stay out of these difficult areas.
Yeah.
That's group number 2. They are important because they're a large group, and when you talk about the total population, and if there's movement in that group, that's going to impact what happens culturally. Okay, so that's why that group's important. I'm going to come back to them because I'm going to talk about the dynamics between the groups when I'm all done. The third group are the Christians who recognize that race is a problem. They will emphasize the themes of racial reconciliation, and they'll talk about racial reconciliation, et cetera. And they want to step into this space, but they want to do it in a somewhat limited way, in the sense of they don't want to spend a lot of time talking about what the next 3 groups I'm going to mention are going to want to talk about. But they recognize there's a problem. There's something to be done. There is work that's needed. You need to be engaged, that kind of thing. So that's group 3, the racial reconciliation group. The fourth group is what I will call the Christian anti-racists.
Okay.
So they are going to talk about things like white privilege. They're going to talk about some of the themes that you hear in the public secular discussion on race, et cetera. And they're going to say those descriptions are an accurate reflection of what's going on. And so they are in the space, and they are, if I can make a distinction, they're more prophetic about the way they engage the space versus the 3s.
Okay.
The 3s just want to step in and try and figure a way to get to peace, but they don't want to be too challenging about it, if I can say it that way. The 4s are quite willing to step into the space and be challenging about it. And of course, part of what's going on is the 4s are connected to the 5th group. The 5th group are the secular anti-racists. So this is where a lot of the terminology for the discussion in the public square comes from, etc., which fours recognize and participate with. Threes are a little more hesitant to do that, if I can say it that way. They might or might not. And the secular anti-racist drive isn't dealing with Christian values so much as general values about justice and that kind of thing. And then the sixth group are what I call the radicals, and the whole thing is so broken we just need to tear it down and start again.
Yeah.
So that's the sixth group over. Now, the thing that's key about the dynamics is the group that's next to you on either side, you can have a good conversation with.
All right.
But once you leap over and go two spaces over, the conversations become more difficult because the shared space is less. Wow. So that's the taxonomy. Those are the dynamics. And so an anti-racist has a hard time talking to an unengaged person because they're too prophetic for the unengaged. Okay. Whereas someone talking about racial reconciliation might be able to have that conversation.
Now, when you say prophetic, what do you?
Well, it's the direct challenge kind of, this is wrong. There's a really deep repentance that needs to happen. There's lamentation that needs to happen. That white privilege is a real category. White superiority they're willing to use all that public terminology.
Challenge.
It's the challenge that's inherent.
Not like they're looking to the future, but speaking
exactly. And so it has to do with the tone of the conversation primarily, and the perspective that's brought to the conversation that's triggering the reactions. And then, of course, an unengaged person can also have a conversation with a Christian nationalist. So here's the important part of the dynamic. And this is kind of part two of this. So I've laid out what the groups are, but here's the way the dynamics work. I've said to you that the second group is important because in many ways in our society overall, they're probably the largest group.
Okay.
And they are
this is the unengaged.
The unengaged. And they're being pulled simultaneously by the ones and the threes. Okay? The ones are saying to them, oh, you don't need to just be unengaged. You need to recognize that there's really a problem, and the problem is that we are under pressure. Usually, ones is primarily a white group. And then the threes are saying, no, there's a real problem here. And if you're a Christian, you should care about reconciliation. So they're pulling that one. So they're pulled in the middle. And whichever way they go, if there's movement, if there's significant movement, that's going to impact the public discussion because that's going to change our politics, our percentages, all those kinds of things. So that's an important discussion. Now, the trick here is threes and fours tend to snipe at one another. Okay. Okay. So these are the Christians who recognize that race is an issue and race is a problem that needs to be addressed, but their strategy of approach in doing so is different.
Right.
And significantly different. So they tend to snipe at one another. And then the problem is this, that in doing that, they actually make the job harder in reaching the twos. Okay. Because they're so busy sniping at one another and trying to say who's doing this right and what's the best way to approach it. The fours, generally speaking, have gone a bridge too far for the twos to engage. Right. All right. So here's the point that I like to make. The threes and the fours need each other. And here's why they need each other. The threes have the ability to speak to the twos that the fours don't. Okay? The threes have the ability to speak to the twos that the fours don't and pull them into the race discussion. Right. Okay. But the history of race in this country has been you don't get anywhere without a push. Okay. Which is why you need the fours.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I talk about this, I say we're so busy. Christians who care about race are so busy kind of saying to each other who's got this right. They actually don't recognize that they both need to exist and they both contribute to trying to get people to take race seriously. They do it in different ways with different elements, but all of that needs to be in play because the twos generally aren't going to go from 2 to 4. Right. Okay. They're gonna walk in through more gradually through 3. And so the fours need to appreciate what the threes offer and the threes need to appreciate what the fours offer. And then we've got to be honest and aware of also why threes and fours exist, because fours exist because they sense at a deeper level, generally speaking, than threes do, although it's a little bit of an overgeneralization, what the experience has been that has produced all the terminology that becomes so controversial.
The terminology that's really coming out of the fives.
Exactly right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so there's got to be an awareness that those dynamics that are being described are part of the space and need to be thought through. The backside of that, however, is how much blame do you end up placing on the people you're trying to move as you engage with that terminology?
Yeah.
And how much personal responsibility do you really want them to feel? Do you want them to become defensive and then therefore not move? Or do you want to do it in a way that allows them to recognize what's going on, but not so identify with it that they back off? And so those are the psychological dynamics that are in the sociological dynamics that I think go on in this conversation.
Wow. So, I mean, what you're saying is there's this taxonomy, right? 1 through 6.
Right.
1 is, look, there is no problem. If it's a problem, it's something's happening to us.
Yeah, that's right.
2 is we're unengaged in this. We know there's a problem, unengaged. 3 is, hey, the problem is there, but it's about reconciliation. 4, like you said, a little bit more prophetic. They're going to be talking about, more of white privilege and things of that nature, which they're getting lingo from the 5s, who are the secular versions of some of that conversation, all the way to 6. And these 6s, these are the ones who are like, man, let's tear the whole thing down. And as you think about that, you can look at that taxonomy, find yourself in there, but then also realize that based on where you are determines how effective you're going to be at engaging somebody else on that spectrum.
Correct. That's a good summary. And of course, part of the problem here is that you're drawing from features across the taxonomy depending on what you're talking about. So, for example, 3s will sometimes struggle with 5s, okay, because they'll say that's secular and that's Marxist. Okay, so they don't want to go there, which also makes them uncomfortable with 4s who are using that terminology.
Yes,
because they'll make that connection.
Right.
All right, and so that's a whole another element of this conversation is what a person associates with each stop on the way.
Oh, interesting.
Okay,
yeah.
And if there's an association that's particularly negative that overhangs the terminology that people are using, that's going to cause some people to be hesitant. If they don't make that connection, or if they say I can distinguish the dynamic from the overall ideology, okay, then they might be a little more comfortable in having those conversations, that kind of thing. So,
do you see people who are in right? So I'm thinking about conversations that we've had, you know what I mean, with other folks. There are folks out there right now, and I can remember if I sat down with them and I'm like, hey. I remember having a conversation with a gentleman about your taxonomy. And so I started the whole thing with the thought process that he might be in the 3 based on some stuff we had done, or maybe a 2. And I was like, so you got the 1, which this person is a Christian nationalist, right? They think that America is the answer for these things. And then you got number 2, and he's like, hold up, wait, what's number 1? So that's Christian nationalism? Well, he's like, well, I mean, I do think America has a part to play, but I don't know if I'm a nationalist, you know what I mean? What I heard in that is like, as we talked more, I realized, oh, he's a 1, but he doesn't like the terminology used to describe him as a 1.
He might be a 1.5.
A 1.5. Okay. There's the spectrum.
Okay, that's my point.
There it is. The boxes.
All right, the boxes are not clean. They are a mix. And the question.
But you can't mix like a 1 to a 4.
No, you wouldn't mix a 1 to a 4, but you can mix a 1 to a 2.
Yeah.
You can mix a 2 to a 3. You can mix a 3 to a 4.
Yeah.
So when you do that, then you realize the way in which a person prioritizes or prioritize is a good word. Prioritizes what they talk about.
If I do say so myself.
Yeah. It prioritizes what they emphasize in a particular conversation.
Sure.
They might say, and it may even shift. If I'm talking to a 2, I might use certain terminology, but if I'm talking to a 4, I might use certain terminology because I know the context of what is going to be heard has shifted.
Yeah. So you're talking about a communication style.
Exactly right. Well, I'm an awareness for
an awareness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Because I don't know, Antwuan, like you're a 1, right? So how do you feel about how he's classifying you, sir?
That's right, man. Bibles and Constitution are all
that's right. Faith, flag, freedom. Got it all.
It's an interesting thing. It's interesting to think about the effect that has on the politics. You know, we're in this political season, and that the way you describe that is a way to understand race in the social sphere or in the public sphere. And it's interesting for me to, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about what are the political implications.
So let me problematize what you've
Wait,
raised.
did you say cobbletize?
No, problematize.
Oh my gosh, thank goodness. I thought if this dude used cobbletize, I was like, we're going to get a dictionary right now.
I was writing it down like new words.
I'm not buying it.
No, but if I'm going to cobble, and problematize.
Okay, there we go.
Word of the
day. All right, so and that is in your political discourse.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with groups, you're dealing with everybody at the same time.
Right.
So the kind of subtlety that you can bring to a one-to-one discussion, because I have an awareness of where you as an individual are coming from, and I know what exactly right. Yeah. It's gone. Okay, everybody's listening to the same thing at the same time and processing it very differently, because as we know, all conversations really have three levels.
Yeah.
The first is what you're talking about. The second is the lens you use to talk about it, which I tell people, lenses mean you focus on certain things, but lenses also mean you may not see certain things.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
And the third one is your identity. The way your identity is tied and interests are tied to what it is that you're talking about.
Well, that's two interesting words. Identity and interest.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting to me. Like you said those two things. Identity, those are two separate
you seem a separate categories.
I'm using, but they're saying
no. I'm agreeing with you. I'm thinking through the relationship.
You're cobbletizing those two together. To try to figure out.
Because I think it is that. Like, if there's anything, we're definitely culturally driven, at least in the American context, by our interests, our individual interests.
Our interests help to define.
I was going to say,
form our identity.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it that our interests are feeding into
our identity or
something? I see myself.
Chicken or the egg.
Yeah. So we need to defend our interests to be the person we
perceive ourselves to be.
We think we are, or that we want to be, or
exactly
to create some image
then
of
that creates
ourselves.
the tribal commitments that we have, etc. So and of course, one of the things that happens in the race conversation is everybody is trying to figure out, and I'll say it this way, whose side are you on? Okay, all right. So it's already set up to be tribal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whose side are you on? And then I say, and then most people view the space as what I call a zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way I gain is if you lose.
Right.
Okay. The moment you see it that way, it becomes a competition, and we're fighting for space.
Right.
Whereas if you view it through a reconciliation lens, and even I think through an anti-racist lens formed properly, then the question is going to be, if we can figure this thing out, we all gain. Okay?
So you're talking about the threes and the fours, if they can kind of work together to some extent, it pulls everybody.
If they understand each other and the space each one contributes to the conversation and how, then there'll be less sniping between them. There'll be more recognition that each group is needed as a part of the conversation, but neither group covers all of the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, we find that. I mean, obviously in the work that obviously with Threaded, the organization we have, even this terminology that you're talking about is, if you call yourself a reconciliation ministry, you get put into the 3 category.
That's right.
If you want to get in the 4 category, you have to call yourself a justice space.
That's right.
Right. And if you use those terms incorrectly with the wrong audience, you get sniped.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So you always are trying to figure out, okay, you and I have gone some trips together. And not too long ago, we went to Montgomery, right?
Right.
In that particular scenario, there's a lot of groups there that are dealing with the racial problem.
Right.
And so if you have to get up in front of that group, like you're dealing with those 3s and 4s, and it becomes an interesting thing what happens, right? Like you have to, it, so you have to use all the terminology.
Exactly.
So you're like, I work at Threaded, and it's a biblical racial reconciliation, unity, and justice ministry. You got to get them all in. So everybody, wait, which one are you? We need to know who to destroy here for a second. Yeah. So you feel that, and you can feel that sort of. I love the conversation we were kind of talking about, this interest and identity.
Yeah.
There's a kind of desire to really double down on a lot of these identities. and why do you think people are so?
Well, the question is, which tribe do they identify with? You know,
Because if they don't identify with a tribe,
Yeah, it's a zero-sum game. I think.
exactly right.
Okay.
The moment
Okay.
you go into the tribal attitude, and you're wondering who wins and which side benefits, and you're asking the questions that way, you've already set yourself up to make it difficult for reconciliation. Okay, because you're more worried about who wins than you are figuring out how to get together.
yeah,
Okay,
that's the competing
that's the
identities.
competing.
That's because getting together doesn't seem like it's a real thing. In a paradigm of competition, a zero-sum game, getting together is a ruse.
Yeah, well,
It's a psychological
plus
ruse.
it's hard.
But if I believe that the only way for me to succeed
Yeah,
is that I beat you,
Right.
Right.
then there is no such thing as us together.
Correct.
Right.
Either you're beating me or I'm beating you. So the paradigm I'm in, this concept of together is
And you've just said what I was going to say.
Abstract.
You
You
stole
just
his
said
line.
which is there's no possibility for reconciliation in that mindset.
Yeah.
In the end, because I'm assessing everything through how this benefits me and my tribe.
Yeah. I'm either gaining or losing, and that's all there is to it.
And that's all there is to it. And if I see it that way, then I'm not. And I actually think that ultimately, now I'm going to express myself in two ways. I think that's ultimately the fault of some of the secular theories that we run into, because they are built tribally and they teach us to see the world tribally. Whereas I think the gospel is designed to have us see the world in a different kind of way with a different kind of identity. So let me go to, you raised the term justice. I'm getting ready to plan to write a book on
wait
on
a second. I just want to make sure everybody heard the way you said that. I'm getting ready to plan. Okay, all right. I've been doing that for years. I've been getting ready to plan.
No, that's a way to say this. I don't have a contract yet.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay.
It's in my head.
To plan.
I know what I want to say.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
just got to say, someone say, "Oh, we'll pay you to do it."
Okay, now that makes more sense than my getting ready to plan.
That's
Nobody's trying to pay me to do it. Yeah, but I'm getting ready to plan on it. I tell you.
So
what.
anyway, so as I'm coming on that highway, okay, and the word justice comes up. The title of the book is Grace and Race. Mm-hmm. And the thesis of the book is, when we make race just a discussion about justice, we've actually cut grace short.
When we make grace just about justice, we actually cut grace short. Why? Because the goal of God's grace is actually to bring people together. Okay? In other words, we risk, because of the way the world sees this space, we risk making justice, and now I'm talking about primarily in a white church, we make making justice a peripheral idea rather than in the middle of the conversation about what it is that God is doing when he reaches out and saves groups of people.
Right.
And so what I want to say is, no, this is not fringe. This is actually a testimony that God is at work in our midst when this happens. Mm-hmm. And this is actually where God's trying to take us as peoples. I mean, let me put it in the New Testament world, and then that way I might soften the edges here.
Oh.
But when God said, I'm going to bring Gentiles and Jews together. Yeah. Okay. And think about the first century. Did Gentiles and Jews get along?
No, absolutely.
No, absolutely not. Okay. So it's like saying, I'm going to make you family. Okay. Yeah. All right. And then my line is, I'm going to make you family. The question is, once God makes us family, have we adopted one another? And so sometimes in the pursuit of the vertical, we don't think through the horizontal part of what that actually represents. But that's salvation isn't just that it's me and my God saving just me. Right. It's God saving us.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the paradigm we just was talking about. If we see Christianity as a gain or loss thing, if we're still working from that mindset of sums and zero sum game, I'm gonna gain or I'm gonna lose, then the gospel is presented and we see it as a gain for me, and then at the end of the conversation, when what really happened with the gospel is he's inviting you out of that paradigm into a new paradigm that says we are.
That's right.
We are. And there's a way that we are.
And that we is intentional and pursued.
That's right.
And so
in the we gain and lose together.
Exactly right.
While I'm gaining, I'm losing. And while I'm losing, I'm gaining, because it's meant to be this harmonious, melodious thing. It's the undoing of sin and of
it
death
is the
in our
beginning
world.
To think of the person next to me not as the other, but as the brother.
Right. But what we're doing, though, we're talking about obviously these competing identities, particularly in the context of the United States, that has these cultural values of one, individualism. So now you the we is not part of the conversation.
That's right.
But even the cultural value of competition as well.
Right.
Right. And so there's no the part that makes the identity so difficult to sort of meld is there's no reward socially for them. Right, we don't reward people for being we. I mean, we like that. That's nice. But at the end of the day, what we really want to see is the self-made person. Right. They did it on their own, and we want to become like that person, and we highlight them. And then from a competition standpoint, in the political realm particularly, and we're seeing this right now in the political space we're in, like people don't get rewarded for collaboration.
Yeah.
They get ridiculed for collaboration. They get rewarded for competition. So, the minute the political person stands on the stage and says, we're better than them, the crowd cheers, right? Because now the tribal thing has done and the competition is on. Right?
Okay, so let me deal with two biblical values that walk into that space, and they're competing values. The one is the term shalom, term peace.
Sure.
Okay. Now, if I ask most people on the street, would they like to be in an environment where peace exists? Okay. I think I get some pretty high numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think political candidates would say, man, I'd like those approval numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, I ask how we get there, I might have a little more difficult conversation. Sure. But simple. Everyone aspires to peace. Think about what reconciliation is designed to achieve. It's designed to achieve peace. Okay? And then the way I get there, and you used the word collaboration earlier, which I think is embedded in Genesis 1 as the way God made us.
No.
Okay, God made us male and female, and we've turned that into a competition.
Yeah.
We've made gender a competition.
Sure.
Okay, so now I'm going to make an analogy, and we battle with one another about who has the power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the way it was originally designed. I tell people, if you read Genesis 1 and 2 carefully, you will see that the creation did not get its promotion from good to very good until man and woman both were made in the image of God.
I agree.
Okay. And then I'd say something that makes the women smile. I say, yeah, we didn't get to be very good till you showed up.
Well,
okay.
That's true.
Okay. All right. It's a painful truth, but there it is. But the whole point of it was the reason God created a woman alongside a man was so that they would complement one another and collaborate together, because they were both told to be fruitful, multiply, and subdue the earth. Subdue the earth is a stewardship term. It's a management term. Right. We're supposed to manage the creation well. I like to say we're all designed to be hummers, okay? We're supposed to make the creation sing. We're supposed to make the creation functional, okay?
Yeah.
And we're supposed to make it be a harmonious place to live. That's what we were called to do and to be. And we do that by collaborating together to make that happen.
Right.
All right. So I've just used the term peace, and I've just used the term collaboration to say that the core values that should be a part of the Christian identity are to work to that kind of space, not at the expense of some, okay, but trying to figure out what is best for all.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, because I think you're right. We have cultural values that make the individual question key. We have cultural values that make my tribe narrowly defined as key.
Yeah.
And we turn it into a competition and a zero-sum game. And so why do we fight? And you get what you pay for. You set it up that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what you want to do, what Christians need to wrestle with, how do I unravel those precepts that orient me in one way and move towards an orientation that now moves outside myself? There's a message I used to do where I say, the arrow when we're born, the arrow is always towards me. What's going on with me in this life?
Yeah.
And God takes what he does through Christ, and not only does he connect me to him, but he's trying to force that arrow to go out.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And towards the other person. I mean, the Great Commandment is all about how I'm regarding someone else.
Right.
God and my neighbor.
Yeah.
Right.
And you got both there, right?
Right.
It's not that the arrow turns out and there's no arrow in.
Right.
Well,
It's-
and that's the fear.
That's the fear, right? That's the zero-sum game, right?
Right.
Because in the ways that you're talking about this, right? Like we just talked about this idea of these cultural values in America, individualism and competition. Those are not necessarily bad in and of themselves. But for the Christian, what we have to do is to in some ways untangle. I think the word you're saying, untangle our zero sum. This is the only way to do it from that, and see that in the Gospels that you see individualism and you see collectivism.
And let me add another layer to this, because I just love cobbletizing.
Cobbletizing. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. And that is, so now think about it this way. As I am wrestling with where we all are together, and that arrow is moving out, I get benefited in an environment that is more peaceful than is full of competition. And so it's reminding people what they long for and need.
Yeah.
But the way they're going about getting there is getting in the way.
Right. Which I don't think anybody argues about. And here's the sniping that comes from this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
No justice, no peace.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where it comes. Like, this is the place where you're like, you want peace. And so I think it is that terminology of shalom that's even a stronger one that we don't really deal with. I look at in the two, obviously peace, you've got the versions of peace where it's an absence of conflict, but it doesn't mean that the conflict has been resolved.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that we have a society that reminds us that if conflict comes, because we know we are humans and we're going to experience it, that we live in a society that's actually going to acknowledge it, handle it, and deal with it all the way around.
That's right.
Right. So I think what shalom gives us is this recognition of sin and the capability of sin, but we live in a society that is that recognizes sin is at work and has created itself into a system that makes sure that it disciplines sin and restores those who have either experienced the sin or been the perpetrator of the sin. So I can live in an environment that and understanding that helps me to deal with the reality of it, where justice is a part of that conversation to bring that as well.
So one of the pushes that come from the 4s to the 3s that I think is legitimate is the idea there's a kind of reconciliation that isn't really reconciliation. It is simply, I'm just going to pretend the differences don't exist, etc. And it almost becomes a way, I'm going to be tolerant, okay, but I'm not really reconciled. If I can make that distinction.
This is the 4s making this claim?
This is the 4 on the 3s.
On the 3,
I think this is legitimate in the sense of, I can't really reconcile with you if I don't recognize how I've harmed you.
Right.
I can't reconcile with you if I haven't recognized the damage that I've brought to the relationship. So real reconciliation requires the difficult aspects of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I also think so you guys have said many things that I would, so I'm just going to speak on that last thing. But real reconciliation, I think, requires the danger I've done to you, that perspective, and the broader perspective of what God intended creation to be and how I've frustrated that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's
so
always multi-layered.
Right. So I know we were talking about individually, but I have frustrated you, wife, and I offended you. You were the direct object of my offense, but I've also frustrated the paradigm that God intends to be.
And I may have impacted my kids.
Right.
And I may have impacted my family.
Right. And so it becomes more, if it ends with, hey, you and I need to be pleasant with each other, and so whatever that takes, then you can have this false reconciliation.
Right.
If it ends with, God, what role should I be playing in this larger paradigm of shalom? I would even make the case of justice. I would rather attach justice to shalom than to reconciliation. Right? Justice being the way things should be in my world. In that sense, you end up asking yourself, the reason why you reconcile, the reason why you confess, the reason why relationships are important is not simply about the other person. It actually turns out to be vertical and horizontal. It's a submission to God and a submission to my brother. Right. It ends up being all of it, right? I love my neighbor, not simply for my neighbor's sake, but for God's sake as well, which is why I think when we start to see this larger paradigm, it's the Christian story is so much more than the secular version, which is to say, let's just create pacification and let's get to a place where we can tolerate or live together in our own spaces if need be, without there being any tension. We didn't know it's not the absence of tension that we're looking for. We're looking for this harmonious flourishing,
for mutual understanding.
This mutual flourishing
Yeah.
that is summed up in what God intends and intended
Absolutely.
in His creation.
So the point that I'm trying to make, I'm not trying to pit justice against reconciliation.
I know you're not.
I'm trying to connect them. And then the point that I want to make about this is when you realize that reconciliation is at the center of the gospel. I do this message from Ephesians 2. And I start off and I say, I can't get to a more soteriologically, theologically significant passage than Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. Salvation is by grace through faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Everyone knows 2, 8, and 9. I call it the Protestant Creed text. Okay? Calvin is happy in that space. All right?
They got to keep reading.
Keep going.
They got to keep going. Next verse. Okay? For we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Okay? Okay, and I'm not done then. I got to keep reading beyond that. Because from there, I got to go to the next paragraph.
Right.
The next paragraph is the creation of the one new man.
That's right.
And Jew and Gentile together, where there is shalom.
Right. Tearing down the walls of hostility.
So I've got reconciliation. I got justice. I've got co-heirship. I've got everything in that in those texts. And it's all put together, and it's for that goal. So when we marginalize this discussion, point is we actually are robbing ourselves of one of the most important testimonies we have, that grace is at work.
Right.
And so
to restore the world back
exactly
to what
right.
God,
And we go back to we're back in Genesis 1.
Right. To what
I tell
He
people
created in Genesis.
we need to learn how to teach and preach the gospel from Genesis 1, not just Genesis 3.
Right.
And and so in the midst of doing that, what that builds is we were built to collaborate with one another to make the creation hum. You know, you ask yourself how dysfunctional or functional the creation is. That's an easy one to answer. If you ask why, well, that's your sin problem. That's another easy one to answer.
Right.
Theologians love that space. They know how to talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
They just don't know entirely how to fix it. You know, okay,
Sure.
Because it requires heart change. Okay. And the heart change that needs to happen is this: the basic sin of Genesis 1 is I want to independently be God.
Right.
Okay? I don't want God to be God. I don't want you to be God. I want to be God.
Which is to say, I want to make things the way I want to make them.
Exactly right.
Not the way you want to make them.
That arrow is
I want to construct my own world.
aimed at me.
all
Okay?
arrows
All
are on
right.
that.
All right.
Yeah.
And of course, the thrust of the scripture is, I like to play with Genesis 3:16. You know, God so loved the world that gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever should believe in Him not perish but have eternal life. And I like to say it's the only sentence I use the word whosoever in, so I get to use.
You said Genesis 3:16.
No, John 3.
No, that guy. Just want to make sure. You said Genesis. I just want to make sure people.
I'm stuck in Genesis.
You're in
I'm
Genesis.
working
It's
my way.
okay.
I'm working my way there. Okay.
I know I know that the DTS folks would have called. So
I
did it for you.
Strip him of his.
So anyway, here's the simple version of that.
Yeah.
God so loved the world that He gave. So just stop and think about that. That is the heartbeat of God. He had a world whose back was turned to Him, and rather than moving to punish it, He tried to move to redeem it. And the way He did it was by giving of Himself. So when I put that all together, it teaches me that arrow is not all in. That arrow is out and towards others. And so when God makes me in His image to image Him, I'm imaging that heartbeat. And when I image that heartbeat, all of a sudden I become a better listener. And I put myself in the position of trying to understand where someone else is coming from. And it just changes the dynamic. If you think about the dynamic of social media right now, that's not the dynamic of social media. The dynamic of social media is I'm going to express myself.
Well, and
let you know it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that conversation, though, there does feel like a kind of zero-sum game, right? Like the model of God giving, right?
Yeah.
There's a self-sacrifice that had to happen for
That's
that.
exactly right.
So is it then a zero-sum game?
It's not a zero-sum game if everyone sacrifices. And this is the reason why the paradigm is hard for us to get our heads around. We're afraid of it because once we understand this paradigm and start to live from it, we fear that nobody else
is going to do that.
And so they're still in the I'll take all that you're giving me. Thank you very much.
Right,
I'm not going to give you anything back.
It's the
And so it
COVID-19. I'm getting all the toilet paper because everybody else is running to the store already, even though I know I don't need all that toilet paper.
Right, which is why the church is meant as a community to exist and exemplify a completely different
and
paradigm, which is what we see in Acts.
Yeah,
when they're like, hey, they turn the thing upside down. Yeah. The people who are angry are the merchants. Mm-hmm. They're like, hey, you're messing with our business, because what that community has learned, they weren't mad about the theology.
No.
They had changed the way commerce happened because they had given themselves to each other.
Yeah.
And it changed the way the economy ran and the whole thing ran. So, but I think we're afraid that once we truly get our head wrapped around this, like we're going to live in a world that if we don't become the dog that's eating the other dog, we'll be the dog that gets eaten. Mm-hmm. And we're worried about that. And so it keeps us from,
and we promote it that
from
way.
Truly stepping in.
We promote it that way.
Yeah. And that's even in the church. And so the church has to be courageous. And I'm saying this with knowing that it's a really difficult thing to say.
Right.
But imagine a church that was courageous enough to exemplify some version of what we're discussing. So that gives people freedom to say, hey, the only way to live isn't that I step on top of each other, but it is that I can have, I don't want to say what I'm about to say. It might sound too Marxist, and I don't have time to
caveat it all.
To caveat it all.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Step back and thinking about it this way. If I look out for myself and everyone else is looking out for themselves, it's like the world of judges. Everyone does what's right in their own eyes. It's like driving on a highway and there are no rules. Okay. And I've done that.
I've been in countries where that's kind of where it works.
And
remember when
Honduras?
When we were in Honduras?
Okay.
And it actually was a safer environment, honly.
It's amazing that people live.
Except that one moment.
That's right.
We almost ran into a semi.
That's okay.
But the flip side of it is, if everybody's looking out for other people, that means everybody's looking out for me.
That's agreed.
Okay.
It's the potluck picture. If
Pepper loves potlucks.
I know, but if you come to the potluck and you're saying, I'm not going to bring food until I see someone else is bringing food, if everyone takes that position, there's no food.
No food gonna be there.
There's no food, right? If everyone takes the position of, I'm not sure that I'm not going to be the only one, right? Then. But if everyone just adopts the position that I'm bringing food, then there's usually plenty left over, right? And no one goes hungry.
Yeah,
it's just that we're afraid to live that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've got a situation in which everybody wants shalom. They want peace, and for the Christian, we recognize that the example of what that looks like has come from Jesus, which is a self-sacrifice, but we hesitate to actually drop into that because we're not sure if everybody else is going to practice the same.
And we're not willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah, willing to be vulnerable. And
even inside the kingdom.
Yeah, but exactly, to believe that we're all going to play by this same game, so we turn it then into the zero-sum game as we go forward.
Right. And then the gospel becomes an accommodator to our zero-sum game, not the kingdom restoration game. And so
speak into that a little bit.
It ends up falling... This is how you end up with believers that say, Jesus came to save me from my sin, and now I'm done because I've gained what I needed to gain.
Okay, yeah.
Right? I've gained at Christ's expense.
Yeah.
Right? I've gained what I need to gain, and now I'm done. That mindset, the end game of the gospel is simply that I've won. I've overcome the thing that could have taken me out.
Yeah.
But that's not what the gospel invites us into. Right? It invites us into this kingdom. Right, this kingdom ethic, this mission, and this mission to redeem the world while we're here, and into a kingdom of mutuality and shalom in the hereafter that we get to begin to exemplify here. And that's the part that I think is difficult. It's really interesting to me that how often we take God's things that are meant to be all the things you described, mutual and peaceful and harmonic and where we're all humming together, and use those very things in our zero-sum paradigm for whatever we think it's good for, and we just discard the rest. And the kicker is to get out of that paradigm altogether and allow the gospel to change everything about how we see everything, God, ourselves, His creation, and how it all is meant to coexist and run together.
Yeah. So how do we do this in this this mode, right? Like
Well,
we're talking about competing
Can
identities.
I raise one other factor?
Is this another question?
No, this is actually another observation
Ooh,
that
I
is
like observations.
that explains why we get stuck.
Okay.
Okay, and why people focus on the individual as opposed to the corporate. Okay, so this is a little church history.
Is it a little church history or?
Well, you can tell me if it's little or not when I get done. Okay, all right. But here we go. Here we go. Christianity is designed to be holistic. Okay, it's designed to cover all of life, every life and every space. If you have any doubt about that, we had state churches, which says as much. We had the abolition movement that said as much. This was before the fundamentalist modernist controversy. Point I'm making is we live in the shadow of the fundamentalist modernist controversy, and we're still trying to cope with it, and we're not doing very well. So here's what happened. Liberals came along, and they said, I like the ethics of Christianity, but I don't necessarily buy the theological story that's underneath.
Political liberals.
And they pulled it apart. Okay, they pulled it apart. They parted into two pieces.
Mhm.
Okay, and they said we're here, and we're not here. Conservatives looked at that, and even fundamentalists at the time, and looked at that and said, "Ooh, we like that deal, but we like it in the reverse."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we believe in the theological story, but that stuff over here is fringe.
Kind of that social.
Exactly
area,
right. It's fringe. So both of them pulled apart something that was actually designed to fit
be
together.
Right.
And then my next line is, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. The trouble is, when you go to put it back together, everyone's seeing it through that lens.
Yeah.
Because what happened is that the conservatives said to the liberals, well, you're dealing with this, but you're really attacking my Bible and my faith.
Mm.
Okay? And I'm not going to let you do that. So I'm going to stand absolutely for my Bible and my faith. Notice the my here.
Yeah.
Okay. For my Bible and my faith, and anything that's corporate and political and social spacious, that's a reflection of your liberalism.
Mm.
That's not a reflection of the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm trying to suggest here is no, these two things actually connect and belong together. They've been pulled apart in a way that's artificial. And if you see that reconciliation and shalom are part of the design of where journey is supposed to take us, at least in a significant way, then you won't marginalize these discussions. You will actually recognize you're doing, and to use your word, you're doing the mission of what God calls us to, because after God saves me, I'll put this in individual terms, after God saves me, I'm supposed to be concerned about us.
Mm.
Okay?
Yeah. Right.
And I'm supposed to make that move. But what blocks the way of that move is the way that move is seen because it's been pulled apart.
Yeah. And you can see that as it plays out even in the political space with, again, conservatives and liberals in that space.
Right.
This conservative, you're talking about conservative Christians, if you will, they're majoring in on this, let's just preach the gospel. Let's just talk about the theology and the spiritual, and politics stays here. We actually don't deal with it as much, right? And if we do it very much from a biblical theological context.
And we build it as a battle, zero-sum game.
Right, exactly.
We build it as a battle only, and we forget the reconciliation part.
Absolutely, because you got the opposite side too,
Right.
this liberal Christianity, if you will, going into the fours, not all the way into the 5 and 6s, but they're thinking the same thing. It's like, no, this thing is a social gospel.
Yeah.
Right? This is something that the gospel played out in public, right, in the social space.
Right.
And if you don't have a theology that supports that, then you're not even a Christian, right? And both of them are looking at each other, are you even a Christian, right, in the midst of it? And to your point, it's like, and I think that's, again, it's the tool of the devil, if I can just go ahead and bring his name into the midst of this, right? Like, that you would have people spread across this whole spectrum that call themselves Christians, but ultimately utilizing or digging in so deeply to these, both, if I can call it I don't know if I call it a theological identities, but these church identities, historic church identities, and a body of Christ identities, but also it's now been aligned in political spaces as well, and being kind of churned up during these political seasons, right, to go deeper in on these separations, where this reconciliatory move is what we're being asked to do, and we're denying the very thing that we were set up to be
Denying
about.
the connection. It's a little bit like having half a contact lens on each eye.
Right.
Okay.
But when you tell somebody that they can't, they can't see that they need the other contact. Right.
Well, one of the hard parts of both evangelism and these kinds of conversations is you're usually put in the position of having to construct categories that people don't currently have. Okay? So how do I do that? How do I get them to see a space that they haven't recognized?
Right.
And that's part of just difficult conversations dynamic is you're trying when I say to someone, you have a blind spot, okay? What I'm saying to them is there's a category that you need that you don't have that helps us with this conversation. And you'll notice that when I describe these dynamics, I'm doing this on purpose. I'm not talking left and right. I'm talking about how we talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this was an equal opportunity employer that I'm talking about. Yeah. Everybody does this to some degree. Correct. Everyone has these problems.
Right.
So if we don't wrestle with how we see that space and think about it and have the ability to be self-critical about it, okay, then we don't create an environment in which I can get there.
So as we kind of wrap up in the midst of it, it feels like based on how we started with this spectrum, 1 through 6, that the 3s and the 4s play a really critical space here.
Correct. But the 2s are the goal.
And the 2s are the goal because they're the biggest group.
They're going to end up being the decider. And here's what I mean: if as many people remain 2s as remain, we will remain where we are.
Okay.
The only thing that changes the dynamic is if the group's numbers change. Okay.
Are they ultimately trying to all get to 3 and 4?
No.
Okay.
They're up for grabs. Remember, I said to you earlier, there are 2 groups pulling on the 2s.
Yeah.
The 3s are pulling on the 2s, and the 1s are pulling on.
But I'm talking about just society as a whole. Like, are we all supposed to be in the 3 and 4?
Well, my hope is I would say if everyone were in a 3 or a 4 category, we'd be in a better place.
Okay. Because you'd at least still have a pool.
Engagement.
You still have a pool because obviously there's help when a 1 comes in. You've acknowledged
and working toward
exactly right.
Something.
You have engagement on the topic. You don't have withdrawal and you don't have hostility.
Yeah.
So you want to pull people in that direction. And then we need to recognize the role that 3s and 4s play together, although they tend not to work together to make it happen, because you need both of them.
Yeah.
You do. You need the people who push, because historically that shows you how advance happens.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm old. I grew up
at least 35.
I went through the civil rights movement, as a kid. I was watching it all happen. I remember how Martin Luther King was viewed at the time.
Right, sure.
Okay, versus how he's viewed now.
Sure.
And I think, that guy made a move. He went nowhere and made a move. Something happened. All right. So I'm sitting here going, and so that's a reflection of kind of the process of what it means for a 2 who's unengaged, or even a 1, to recognize the value of a 3 or a 4. Well, Martin Luther King was pushing. He was pushing. Okay. He may not have been a Malcolm X, but he was pushing. And so that shows you the value of the 4. The value of the 3 is I can have that conversation with the person who's saying, should I even be engaged with this? And you can say to the person sitting next, yeah, this is important. This is worth pursuing. And I'm not gonna shove you there, okay, which is the risk the 4 takes. Okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and hopefully get you to see the value of being a part of this conversation, and rather than opting out and being a spectator on it or withdrawn from it, actually participating and trying to help us get somewhere better.
That's good. So I think about our audience. I know we've got 4s and I know we've got 3s, and we probably have a few 2s that, depending on the title of of the episode, they may jump in and just take a look. You know what I'm saying? So I think anybody who's watching, I think it's important to do some self-evaluation of where you might be right on this spectrum, right? And again, it's just a taxonomy that we're prescribing to some extent. Finding your space on there, and then articulating or creating even an idea of how you would speak to others around you on this taxonomy. If you're 4, how do you engage the 3? And even how would you engage the two that you might run into? Because
or even the one, believe it or not.
Or even the one, because you will run into those for sure.
Yeah.
But there is a way, and I think that's a big jump for sure, right? Like it's a huge jump.
That's
if
part
you're
of the
four.
point.
Exactly. Right. But if you
it's
can
an
at least
increasing number, though, I feels like the one is one of the largest growing categories.
Yeah. But at least, if anything else, the 3s and the 4s that are watching this, to stop sniping one another and look for ways to work together around a conversation in which you both have value in. And that'll allow us to not only pull those 2s and those 1s, but if we take your taxonomy, there's a Christian piece, and then it all of a sudden changes to a secularized piece.
And it becomes then a sliding scale.
Correct.
Because then it means I'm not going to park, okay? I'm going to remain open.
Yeah.
And in the midst of remaining open, I may slide across that scale.
Yeah.
I may find myself, if I look at where I am now versus where I was 5 years ago, I may ask the question and say, ooh, that's interesting.
Right.
How'd that happen?
And the empathy for those who are sliding as well.
Exactly right. And to be and then to be aware that there is a difference between a 3 and a 4, and this is very important. The difference between a 3 and a 4 and a 5 and a 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Just be aware that is a real difference.
Right.
Okay. Because what sometimes happens is they all get lumped together.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And that becomes a problem, because now I'm attributing to you. Let's assume you're a 3 or a 4. I'm attributing to you, because you care about the race space, something that's coming out of the 5 or 6 category that may not actually attach the way you're seeing the space.
Right. That's good. Man, good combo. I mean, we got a lot of different things coming out of that
Lots
space.
of interesting stuff to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Bock, Daryl, DB, Dr. B, whatever you want, right? Like, thanks for coming in and
thank you for
joining the conversation. Kabbalatizing all of that wonderful stuff as we do.
It plays to have a shoe to put on your foot.
That's it's usually in your
made
mouth
for walking.
Well, it's usually in your mouth, so that's usually where I'm at. Hey man, this is Color Commentary, and we are so glad that you are joining us here for this series that we are walking through, where we're trying to figure out what does it look like for Christians to move into the public sphere, and how do we do that effectively. I hope you were able to get a lot of really good insights and opportunities to sort of reflect on maybe where you are in this conversation, and how you can now engage those as you may identify them and the things that they say. I love the empathy aspect as well, recognizing that there's points in time probably where you might have been a different number on the scale, and how would you want people to pursue you as you're drawing them into maybe some of the ideas you even have today, right? And so this is a great opportunity to continue to think through that. We can't wait to come back for our next episode. We're going to continue to go deeper in on the conversation. So happy that Dr. Bock was able to join us, and of course be in the studio with my man Antwuan, Malone. Grateful for all the folks that are continuing to put this new venture that we have together. We got Pepper in the back here, which you'll probably see a little bit of her as we keep going through the series, and Kevin, who's producing this and on the mic there as well, making sure we look good and editing all the things we need. And of course, this is Color Commentary. It is about it's not the colored about skin color as much as it is about lenses and the lenses that you look through. And we want to give you an opportunity through Colored Commentary to look through different lenses so that you can see the world in all its beautiful 4K creation that God made it. So the only way you can do that is that if you go out into the world, that you make sure that you stay colored.